The 1931 Dracula.
Mm.
It's more than just a classic horror film. It's a window into a whole era of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Early Hollywood. The genre's just starting to find its legs. And then boom, Bela Lugosi steps onto the screen as the Count himself.
Yeah.
Incredible to think about the impact it had.
It really captured the public's imagination. This wasn't just a scary movie.
Yeah.
It became a cultural phenomenon. And it's fascinating to see how the film achieved that through visual storytelling.
Right, like that opening scene.
Mm-hmm.
With the carriage winding through those ominous, shadowy mountains. It just oozes atmosphere.
Masterful foreshadowing. Right from the start, the film establishes a sense of unease, pulling you into this world of darkness and mystery. They really took inspiration from Gothic literature and stage productions of the time to create that visual language.
And then we meet Renfield. And wow, talk about a character who goes through it. One minute he's terrified. The next he's completely under Dracula's spell.
That's where Dwight Frye's performance is just brilliant. He captures Renfield's descent into madness so perfectly, you can practically see his sanity slipping away. The film doesn't shy away from showing the psychological manipulation. How Dracula slowly breaks down Renfield's will.
It's unsettling to watch. And then, of course,
Mm-hmm.
there's the whole bug-eating thing. I mean, talk about iconic imagery.
That's right. It cemented the archetype of the creepy, bug-eating servant in popular culture. You can draw a direct line from that portrayal to countless other vampire stories that followed.
Okay, so then we get Dracula's grand entrance at the opera. And let me tell you, the man knows how to make an impression. He locks eyes with Mina across the crowd, and you instantly know something's up.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always wondered, why Mina? What makes her so fascinating to him?
It plays into the classic vampire trope of being drawn to innocence and beauty. Mina represents purity, a stark contrast to Dracula's darkness. The film uses this to explore themes of seduction and temptation, but in a way that's filtered through a very specific 1930s lens. It's subtle, yet incredibly effective.
Definitely. And then there's the scenes where they show off Dracula's powers, transforming into a bat, hypnotizing Renfield. Obviously, no CGI back then. So how did they pull off those special effects?
They relied on ingenuity and a deep understanding of filmmaking techniques. They use things like forced perspective to make objects or people appear larger or smaller than they are, stop-motion animation for the bat transformations, and clever editing to create seamless transitions and illusions.
It's amazing how effective those early techniques were. It still works.
It's a testament to the skill of those early filmmakers. What they lacked in technology, they more than made up for in creativity and artistry. They understood the power of suggestion and atmosphere, and they used it to their advantage.
Speaking of understanding Dracula's weaknesses, enter Van Helsing, our vampire hunting hero. That scene where he reveals Dracula has no reflection, pure cinematic gold, good versus evil, science versus the supernatural, it's all there.
Exactly. Van Helsing represents reason and knowledge. He's a direct contrast to Dracula's charisma and darkness. You could say he's the prototype for all the vampire experts we see in movies and shows today. The one who understands the creature's weaknesses and how to defeat it.
And defeat him he does.
Yeah.
The final confrontation with Van Helsing, driving that stake right through Dracula's heart. It's brutal.
Yeah.
But, there's a certain satisfaction to it. How do you think that ending holds up for audiences today?
It's interesting, because what might seem tame by today's standards was actually quite shocking for audiences in 1931. It speaks to how societal norms and expectations around violence and entertainment have shifted over time.
I guess back then, even the suggestion of violence was really pushing the boundaries.
Exactly. The ending, with its stark violence, reflects a lot of the anxieties of the time, the fear of the other, the need to restore order. It was a way to process those anxieties and offer a sense of catharsis. And we can't talk about Dracula without mentioning Bela Lugosi's performance. He embodies that seductive, yet menacing quality of the character so well.
He's mesmerizing to watch. Those piercing eyes, those slow, deliberate movements. He owns every scene he's in, I've also heard. The director, Todd Browning, had a really specific vision for the film.
That's right. Browning was already a well-established horror director. But with Dracula, he wanted to create something truly atmospheric and unsettling. He drew a lot from Bram Stoker's novel, obviously. But he also brought his own unique style and sensibilities to it.
So it wasn't just a straightforward adaptation.
Not exactly. Browning streamlined certain plot points and really emphasized the visual elements of the story. He understood that atmosphere and suggestion could be just as effective as outright gore, especially in the context of cinema. And you have to remember, He was pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable on screen at that time.
Oh, absolutely. Like the scene with the vampire brides. It's still so creepy,
Yeah.
even by today's standards.
Imagine how groundbreaking that must have been back then. Browning was playing with themes of sexuality and danger, all within the confines of the Haze Code, which was just starting to enforce censorship on Hollywood films.
For those who might not know, the Haze Code was basically a set of moral guidelines that dictated what was and wasn't allowed in films for decades.
Yeah.
And it really restricted how filmmakers could portray certain topics.
It's fascinating to see how Browning managed to work within those limitations, while still creating such a powerful and suggestive atmosphere.
It's incredible what they achieved with such limited dialogue, too. It's all about those looks,
Yeah.
the gestures, the way they use shadows and light. It's a masterclass in visual storytelling.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why Dracula has endured for so long. It speaks to our primal fears, our fascination with the unknown, in a way that goes beyond language and cultural barriers.
We've talked about the atmosphere, the characters, the special effects.
Yeah.
But what about the music? Did that play a big role in building the suspense?
It's interesting, because the original release of Dracula actually had very little original music. They mostly used pre-existing classical pieces, which was common practice back then.
Really? I would have thought they would have gone all in on the creepy organ music.
Well, they did actually use that for the Spanish language version of Dracula, which was filmed on the same sets at night with a different cast and crew. Many film historians actually consider the Spanish version to be superior in some aspects, particularly in its use of music and cinematography.
Wow. I had no idea there were two versions.
Yeah.
See? Always learning something new.
It really highlights how collaborative filmmaking is. Different creative minds can interpret the same material in completely different ways, each bringing something unique to the table.
It makes you wonder what other hidden gems are out there, just waiting to be rediscovered. Okay, so we've really dug deep into the making of this film. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what do you think Dracula's lasting legacy is? Why are we still talking about this film nearly a century later?
I think it's a combination of factors. The stunning visuals, those unforgettable performances, and those timeless themes that it explores. It tapped into something primal in our collective psyche, and it continues to resonate with audiences today.
And let's not forget, it gave us one of the most iconic villains of all time.
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi's Dracula is just.
He absolutely set the standard for all vampire portrayals to come. Even now, when you say Dracula, that's the image that pops into most people's heads.
And that's pretty incredible. For a film made all the way back in 1931.
It speaks volumes about cinema's power to transcend time and create a lasting cultural impact. This film wasn't just entertainment, it became part of our shared cultural language.
You know,
Yeah.
it really makes you appreciate the artistry and craftsmanship that went into making those early horror films. They didn't have all the fancy technology we have today, but they still managed to create something truly unforgettable.
It all boils down to the power of storytelling. At its core, Dracula is about good versus evil, that age-old battle between light and darkness. And those are themes that resonate across cultures and throughout time.
Absolutely. It's a story that continues to fascinate us, inspiring countless adaptations and reimaginings.
From stage plays to graphic novels, expert speaker, even video games, expert speaker. Dracula's influence is everywhere, expert speaker. It all started with this one groundbreaking film.
It really does make you realize that great storytelling never goes out of style. So after this deep dive into the 1931 Dracula, what stands out to you most? What do you think is its most enduring legacy?
For me, it's the film's ability to tap into those deep-seated fears and desires we all have. It repels and attracts us at the same time, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. And it does all of that with a level of artistry and sophistication you rarely find in horror.
Couldn't agree more. And it's a film that still has the power to surprise and delight, even after all these years.
It reminds us that great storytelling is timeless.
Well said, so. To all our listeners out there, if you haven't seen the 1931 Dracula, I highly recommend adding it to your watch list. It's a true cinematic classic.
And even if you've seen it before, maybe it's time for a rewatch. You might be surprised by what you discover on a second viewing.
And be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. And of course, if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more explorations into fascinating topics. Until next time, keep on learning.